This story takes place down a road near the house I grew up in rural Canada. So my best friend and I grew up together. We were neighbors from about 6 years old up until I was about 15. Me, her, and my sister would always go for walks down a road near our house when we were younger. So one day, while my sister and I were at her house, she still lives at the same house she grew up in, but we moved away a long time ago. We decided to go for a walk for old time's sake. We went down the same road we always did, and it was a lot of fun. This particular road had a lot of hills and trees and is very scenic, especially in the fall, but is very isolated with almost no houses and close to nobody even passing through. As we're walking along the road and we start nearing the bottom of the first huge hill, we see in the ditch of the road a freezer. Now, because of the isolated location, there is no guardrail despite there being a massive gully. We're instantly intrigued when we see it and begin nervously laughing and joking that there will be a body in there. Obviously, we weren't going to leave without looking inside. This was our road, after all. We knew this area like our own home, so we all approached this small freezer and noticed that laying beside it is a black garbage bag, slightly torn open. We used a stick to tear the bag and peek inside to see dirty child's booster seats and a single child shoe. We thought it was strange, but people often dump unwanted garbage down the gullies in the area, so we moved on and proceeded to open the freezer. As soon as we did, it hits us. This foul and disgusting odor. I have never smelled something so vile. We slammed it shut and ran away gagging. My sister throws up, and I, seeing that, almost throw up myself. At this point, we're all disgusted, but we have to see what smells so bad. My friend stays back to keep a lookout while my sister and I go back to see. This time, we hold our breath and peek inside, and there we see it. A decomposing blob of flesh, partially in a black garbage bag. Half of the inside of the freezer was black with flies and covered in brownish blood. We can see some ribs and what appears to be a skull. The flesh is a mix of brown, red, and grayish ooze. We slammed the freezer shut, gagging again. We decided to go back to my friend's house to grab some gloves, hoodies, and bandanas to tie around our mouths and noses. We returned with our car this time, so we can leave quickly if needed to be. Now, I should mention that there's a house about a kilometer down the road that most people in the area suspect to be a grow-up or a meth house, and we're afraid that we stumbled upon their freezer and that maybe they'd see us, hence why we wanted a car to leave in. So when we return, we leave the car running and proceeded with the gloves and bandanas covering our faces. We record so we can look back at the video later without having to keep the freezer open for too long. Again, we can make out some ribs and possibly a skull, and of course, the chunk of rotting meat. I'll play those videos on screen right now. I'm not sure how much I'll have to blur for YouTube, but I warn you, those with a weak stomach may want to look away momentarily until the videos on screen are over. Suddenly, we hear vehicles coming down the road and freak out. Not many vehicles drive by this isolated road, so we're instantly suspicious. We run towards our friend's car. Before we can make it, we see a van driving slowly. As they drive by, we realize it's just a family cruising through, probably sightseeing or something. When they're out of sight, we check out the freezer several more times and finally find what appears to be a deer hoof. My sister gives up and says it's just a deer that someone put in their freezer, then either forgot about it or their freezer broke, so they decided to dispose of it in the gully. Due to the smell and not wanting to clean it up, my friend and I aren't so sure. We're convinced someone may have killed someone, a child most likely because of the booster and the shoe we found earlier, and maybe they threw a deer hoof in there to throw people off. I've heard of some serial killers doing that to evade suspicion, and everyone passed it off as a dead animal. Anyway, we phone the police and they tell us they'll send someone to come talk to us so we can show them where we found it. We wait a couple of hours and no one shows. We call the number the dispatcher gave us, non-emergency number, and they tell us they'll send someone the next day. They probably didn't take us too seriously, and seeing it was Thanksgiving, they probably didn't want to bother sending anyone out. We made sure to tell them it may just be an animal. Obviously, we didn't want to tell them that we 100% found a dead body, but that we would like someone to confirm and to get rid of the freezer. Maybe that's the reason they didn't come, I don't know. Long story short, the police never showed up or even contacted us to ask any questions. We returned several weeks later, the freezer was gone, as well as the booster seat and child's shoe. Everyone we told laughed it off and said it was a deer, and we were crazy. I'm not so sure. I'm still convinced to this day that we found a human body. I am a 33-year-old white female from Los Angeles. Yeah, very convincing, I know. 3 years ago, my boyfriend and I, as planned for 5 years, turned 30, sold everything we owned, including my car, took his Trailblazer and decided to travel around the States and Canada. I guess you could call us backpackers, as we tend to chase good weather, find a state park, and backcountry hike into the wilderness for days at a time. My brother likes to joke that we are anti-establishment hippies. We don't necessarily live off the grid, but between the two of us, we have one prepaid phone we use for emergencies or checking in with family and friends, and one MacBook which I use for work. I'm a freelance writer/content creator, and I am on retainer with a robotics company. I mostly write boring white papers or web content. The whole point of our living situation is to live debt-free and have as few bills as possible. I only use free Wi-Fi, so 1 to 2 times a week we have to go to a city with a Starbucks. This background info is only important so you know more about who we are and how simply we live. Neither of us are involved in social media and know very little about Reddit or Instagram or use any apps because our phone isn't a smartphone. We don't even text. Last summer, we decided to do some backcountry hiking in Arkansas. It's one of those states you don't ever really hear about other hikers visiting, but we read that it had some beautiful natural landscapes. It does. The rules at this particular park were pretty lax. We didn't need a permit. There were a few basic laws and guidelines, but there were no check-ins needed. We had all the basics and had planned to do a 6-day hike. 3 in, 3 out. The whole time we were out there, we didn't see or hear another soul. But on one day, we were preparing to move off trail and find a camping spot as it was getting near dusk. 1 to 2 miles off the trail is usually the standard for us. We took what looked like kind of an animal trail, and about half a mile out, we saw a green 2-person tent. It was almost camouflaged in the foliage, so we came onto it by accident. Some backpackers prefer privacy, others are more social. We're the more social type. We've had some great experiences camping near other backpackers, sharing stories, food, and a joint or two. We're around 30 yards away from the tent. It was zip closed, so my boyfriend shouts a greeting to make our presence known. No movement and no sound. We assumed the green tent guy either wasn't around or didn't want to be bothered, so we started off in a new direction to get some distance between us. We camped, never heard a peep. We moved along the next morning, completely forgetting about green tent guy, until nearing the end of day 5 on our trek back. We were again looking for a spot to camp off the trail when we came up on green tent guy again. This isn't that unusual, but normally backcountry hikers keep moving, so we really weren't expecting it. The tent flap was open, so my boyfriend yells his greeting again, and nothing. My boyfriend wants to go check it out, saying it's weird and maybe someone is hurt. I didn't like the idea from the get-go, because even though we hadn't had any bad experiences personally, we'd heard enough stories from other backpackers about hermits and mountain men that want privacy, carry guns, and etc. But my boyfriend assured me we'd be fine, and if all else fails, offer him some weed to keep the peace, and we'd go our own way. As soon as we get within 20 yards of the place, the smell of decomposition is intense. My boyfriend has been hailing his greeting over the last 20 yards, and once the smell hits him, he stops and turns to me and says, "What if we find a dead body?" My skin crawled. I was immediately afraid. I had never seen a dead body before, and I don't want to. The closer we got to the tent, the worse the smell got. I knew for sure we were going to walk in on some old camper's rotting corpse. What we found was worse than that. Outside the tent was a dead doe's leg, all 4 of them, covered in flies. It looked like the legs had been cut most of the way and then ripped off the rest of the way. It was a mess. Inside was the body and head of the deer, but the middle portion was swaddled in a blue fleece blanket that was blood-soaked at the bottom where the legs used to be. It was laying on its side, bottom facing the tent entry. The tail had been cut off and the anus and vagina was covered in dried blood and a gap, like something had been penetrating it. The same with its mouth. The bottom portion was bent down at a scary, broken-looking angle. The tent was open so we could see everything without having to go inside. Not that we would have anyways, because at this point the smell was almost debilitating. There was a dirty, almost empty clear bottle of Jergens baby oil and stained green and white French kitchen towel. That was it. I immediately started crying and begging him to go. All I could muster was, what the fuck? And we ran. We ran to the trail and jogged down it for as far as we could go until dusk was finally on us and we had to set up camp. We didn't go very far off the trail and neither of us slept. We didn't set a fire or use headlamps after full dark. We just sat up whispering to each other, going over and over what we had just seen. Every little noise startled us. It was like our brains were on red alert. I kept thinking at any moment a dead deer rapist would come back to his tent, see our footprints or something, know we were there, and track us back to our tent. I've never been so scared in my entire life. Just before dawn, we tore down and started out. My boyfriend stopped at the ranger station on our way out of the park to report what we had seen. The ranger was a young guy, around our age, and looked as freaked out by our story as we were telling it. He wrote most of it down and my boyfriend showed him on the map approximately where I had been. He asked if we knew if the deer had been killed, and at that point we hadn't even thought about it. We just assumed it had been shot. But because of the blanket, we didn't see a wound, but we weren't exactly giving an autopsy either. We have since shortened our backcountry hikes to a maximum of 4 days. We've also been a lot less eager to call out of other campsites, and have never approached another unmanned tent again. My name is Corey, and I've spent a lot, and I mean a lot of time, camping, hiking, and hunting. I've seen all kinds of predators, and I've been in some pretty sticky situations. Everything from a tornado heading my way to being tailed by some bears, so I don't frighten easily. This past July, I was out camping near my family's farm in western Iowa, along with my girlfriend, Alexa, and my best friend, Jason, and his new girlfriend, Samantha. Samantha actually had never been camping before, let alone more than a mile off the trail in the middle of a forest. She was understandably nervous, but we were watching out for her. We do watch out for prairie rattlers, poison ivy, and even mountain lions in this part of the state. We made up camp in a clearing on top of a small hill with a few trees, but we're deep in the woods, to be sure. We arrived to make camp, eat, drink, and went to bed by midnight. Nobody had any injuries besides a few mosquito bites. Everything was going according to plan. Until I suddenly woke up to the sound of Samantha screaming at the top of her lungs. I just couldn't believe how loud she was screaming. It was actually insane. I woke up, I guess at the same time as Alexa, grabbed my light and my Glock and ran out. I told her to stay in the tent, just in case. Jason was already trying to comfort Samantha, and she was talking, almost babbling about something huge walking through the camp and scratching at the tent and making a terrible sound. I told her it could have been a coyote, or even a mountain lion. What little food and trash we did have was outside the camp area, so that wasn't the issue, but I assured her that I would stay up late and light the fire again. I would take turns with Jason watching the fire because our movements and the fire should scare anything away. This seemed to comfort her, and she actually went to sleep in with Alexa. Jason and I both stayed awake talking quietly, watching the fire and checking around camp for tracks and signs. We couldn't see anything obviously wrong or suspicious. It certainly could have been a mountain lion, and this did have me on edge with the girls there. About 30 minutes had passed and Jason walked just out of the firelight to take a leak. He was off to my left, my tent across the fire in front of me, Jason's tent behind me. There off to my empty right, I saw something and heard a large crunch. Jason heard it also, and was practically still pulling up his pants running towards the fire. "What the hell was that? That's big," he said. "I know, could be a cat. You better get your 44 out of your bag too. And get that bright tack light," I told him. He returned with those items and we waited to illuminate whichever area we heard more movement from next. Crunch and snap, more movement almost directly behind us. We stood up simultaneously and spun around, turning the bright light on. For just a second, we saw what almost looked like a gorilla-sized and shaped figure disappear back into the trees. At this point, I'm just trying to keep it together, and Jason is just frozen. I tell him to snap out of it and that we need to get the fire to grow. Once the fire is larger, we both need to take a position, one at the front and one in the back of my tent to protect the girls. We heard this awful grumbling and growling sound for the rest of the night. I have never heard anything like it, and large crunching and snapping sounds continued to emanate from the woods behind Jason's tent and really all around us. Periodically, we would see something move either to our left or right in the clearing, just outside the trees. I kept the fire going. I actually had the fire pretty enormous by the end of the night. As soon as the sun started to come up, we packed up. On our way out, we saw large prints in the mud down by a small stream at the base of the hill we were camped on top of. I can't really say anything other than the fact that they basically looked like a huge man's prints. The thing we saw was not a man. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was gonna hurt us. I don't know if it was Bigfoot. Frankly, I don't want to know. The way I see it, it's really not relevant because I was thinking it was a mountain lion initially. Those are also dangerous. I won't let this stop me from camping. Sometimes I guess you just hear scary things at night in the woods because scary things do live in the woods. I guess that's just part of the adventure.